What lies beyond the journey of a lifetime? This is a question that Frieren Beyond's Journey's End often puts forward in front of us. What lies ahead of you when everything you have set out to achieve has been achieved? Beyond the adventures, friendships and bonds, hardships, and all the fun you had along the way, is it really an end? Or is it merely another chapter in a chronicle thousands of years old and yet unfinished? This is a story of passage of time, of old age, of love that transcends time itself. This is a story of acceptance and growth. This is the story of
Frieren.
Frieren as a story does so many things right, with its well-written characters, incredible world building, and emotional moments down to its near-flawless pacing, asking us as viewers some really important questions about mortality and the passage of time. I must say that episode 1 of Frieren took me by surprise. We have a hero's party returning from their quest to defeat the Demon King. Already, the main goal that many other fantasy shows derive their motivation to move forward from has been completed. The hero Himmel, Eisen the dwarf warrior, Hyter the priest, and Frieren the elven mage. Their triumphant return is being celebrated. The world has entered a new era of peace. As the party reminisces about their adventures, we are filled with a feeling of nostalgia and sadness. This is the end of their long 10-year-old journey together.
短い間だったけどね。
短い?
This is where we start to get a hint of where this story is going. Throughout the dialogue between the party, it is mentioned multiple times how time is different for an elf. Eventually, she leaves the party behind on her own whimsical adventure. Seasons change. We see her traverse mountains, explore magical caves, move from town to town in search of new magic. The shopkeeper that looked so young at the start of her journey is now an old man. It's been 50 years. She decides to go back to the holy capital. The city has changed so much in just 50 years. But this isn't really a surprise to her, but catches her off guard. Himmel isn't young anymore. The party reunites for one last time to see the era meteor shower that happens once every 50 years. A promise Frieren made to Himmel so casually on the day they came back from their journey. Himmel describing how much he had missed their adventures together and how Frieren had always been there for every beautiful moment of their journey broke my heart. Having been on his last adventure, Himmel passes away. It is at this moment Frieren realizes something. All of the moments they spent together come flashing back to her mind. The regret of not trying to get to know Himmel comes crashing down on her.
なんでもっと知ろうと思わなかったんだろう。
50 years might not be much to her, but to Himmel, it was a lifetime. What would you do if you had all the time in the world? Would you cherish every moment you have with the people you love, knowing how much little time you have with them? Or would you even bother to create such bonds? After all, you will be the only one left behind. The passage of time is an important concept in this show. As the story progresses, we see Frieren come to terms with it and cherish the moments she has with her new party. It is through these people she learns that just because something doesn't last for long doesn't mean it's insignificant. Frieren as the main character works so well for this show. Everything down to her character design screams elegantly whimsical. She is also a character archetype done right. So many shows that try to do the strong and stoic character often end up with a personality that is much more monotone and unable to convey important emotions. Frieren, on the other hand, has so much personality that I was quite surprised when I first watched the show. Despite being thousands of years old, she still has childish tendencies and quirks that are frankly quite charming. She is also very funny.
宝の山だ。うひょー。薬は服だけ溶かすんだよ。返品してきなさい。やめてよ。
I had many a chuckle through the constant gag of her getting stuck in mimics.
この中身は貴重な魔導書だよ。私の魔法使いとしての経験がそう告げている。怖いよ！怖いよ！
And the faces she makes throughout the show. She genuinely loves magic. No matter how insignificant the spell is, she will try to acquire it. And as the show goes on, we learn the reasons behind her love for collecting spells. Her biggest flaw is her apathy towards other people's time. Frieren is an elf, and elves live for an eternity. Her perception of time is much different than ours. Decisions that take us an instant to make, she can postpone for centuries. To her, time is an infinite resource, and it is this perspective that has hampered her from creating new relationships. Why bother to know someone when they won't even be around for the next 100 years? It is through Himmel and the guilt of not getting to know him better that she decides to slow down and take her time. This is what ultimately sends her to a journey of retracing the steps she took 80 years ago. And throughout this journey to the end of the world, she starts coming to a realization of how much she actually knew about them. Perhaps because of how long elves live, it just takes a lot of time for them to process their experiences and emotions. This whole story so far is just Frieren processing the 10 years she had spent with her party. She often dreams of her party, thinking back to moments that clearly have had a great impact on her. She also thinks of Himmel, growing as a person, as an individual over the course of the story. Fern is easily one of the highlights of the show for me. She is a war orphan from the southern lands, taken in by HECATE and eventually ends up as Frieren's disciple. I really love her relationship with HECATE and her motivation to become a mage. She wants to repay her debt to HECATE for saving her by learning something to support herself even after HECATE's death. She is aware of HECATE's mortality and pushes herself every day to become a full-fledged mage before the inevitable happens. Unlike Frieren, she values her time, and she is the one who grounds Frieren and by extension the pace of the show. She's just like Frieren in so many ways, and yet so different. She has the same stoic nature as Frieren, perhaps as a consequence of her childhood trauma, but underneath that exterior, there is doubt. Even though sometimes she comes off as distant, she still shows so much care for the people around her. She is still a child and often acts like one, which leads to a lot of funny moments, but stark. Throughout the show, we see her grow up physically and also inwardly into a confident mage. But most of all, she's cute. Very cute.
ごめんってば。
For the first 2 years of their journey, they're just traveling from town to town without a clear sense of direction, collecting spells. Spells like removing rust from bronze statues, turning grapes sour, or folk magic to create warm tea, and Fern isn't really happy about it. She questions Frieren as to why she loves magic so much and why she collects spells. Fern is unsure. The whole reason she decided to become a mage was because she didn't want HECATE to worry about her future, and now that she has become one, she questions the path forward. To her, any skill that would help her to support herself would have sufficed. She may justify her grievances by saying that a powerful mage like Frieren shouldn't be wasting her time doing unimportant side quests, but Fern is aware of her limited time. She worries that she might waste away her life following Frieren doing nothing significant. So, after spending 6 months searching for blue moon weed just so that Frieren could decorate Himmel's statue from the flowers that grow in his hometown, Fern finally opens up to Frieren. Their relationship continues to grow from here on. I absolutely adore their moments together. You can clearly see the dichotomy of how Fern views her relationship with Frieren. She talks about how she has known Frieren for a long time, which is true. She has known her effectively half of her life, and she clearly has picked out on Frieren's behaviors and habits, whereas Frieren up to this point hasn't really understood Fern. Perhaps it is due to how she views time, or perhaps she just hasn't realized how much she actually understands Fern. But that doesn't mean she isn't trying to. She goes to the effort of picking an almost perfect gift for her, which ends up with them sharing a beautiful moment together. Frieren feels the guilt of not trying to get to know her previous party better, and now she has decided to do so with Fern. As their bond grows stronger, the passage of time also slows down, signifying how much Frieren acknowledges Feren's time and cares for her. Stark is a coward, or so he thinks. He comes from a village of warriors where there is no place for the weak. Unfortunately, one day his village was attacked by demons, leading him to flee and abandon his village, leaving him with a hefty dose of survivor's guilt. I was initially concerned when Stark was first introduced into the story. Here we go again. The classic comic relief character, the Zenitsu of the show. But all those concerns were unnecessary, because Stark is him. His character motivation is nothing grand, but it feels so real. He wants to bring back the stories of his adventures to his master Eisen, to whom he is grateful for taking him in and teaching him how to fight. He remembers how much that 10-year adventure meant to Eisen, and he wants to repay his master by bringing back the stories of his adventures before he passes away. Throughout the show, we see the layers of complexity slowly peel off from Stark. Despite being strong enough to kill a dragon with just one blow, Stark lacks self-confidence. He brands himself a coward for running away from his village when the Fire Nation attacked. Demons attacked his village. Adding insult to injury was his father, who branded him a failure despite his hard work, and ignoring the fact that he is just like 6. Luckily, he was picked up by Eisen and trained in the ways of the warrior. But he never really got those words of affirmation that he desperately needed from Eisen, at least not directly. After all, warriors can be really awkward. It is during his conversation with Fern, as she describes her memory of confronting a monster for the first time, he finally finds his resolve. He will not abandon the people of the village that he spent 3 years of his life living in. Not again. Which leads us to our first main action sequence. And it was spectacular. Even after the realization that he just killed a solar dragon by himself, Stark doesn't exclaim in surprise or make a fuss about it. He just looks towards our duo and smiles. Episode 12 is when we are finally introduced to Stark's backstory. It is here that Stark finally breaks away from his self-doubt. It is the realization that he has always been acknowledged by his master and by his brother Stoltz, who cared for him so deeply and asked him to leave the village to save his dear little brother. As Frieren presents a hamburger steak for his birthday and finally reveals to him that Eisen often used to make these ridiculously large steaks on their birthdays during their travels, as it is a dwarven tradition to celebrate warriors that work hard. This leads to Stark remembering his brother making the same hamburger steak on his birthday. His hard work has always been acknowledged. It was simply beautiful. There is no need for words, just a beautifully animated scene of him acknowledging how much his master and his brother cared for him as he takes a bite. I love Stark. Everybody loves Sein, but not as much as he loves older women.
おかげで最高の目覚めでした。
The introduction to Sein was such a great gag. We have a character design that looks too good to be just a side character. And here he is, delivering a monologue about his life story, and then the camera cuts to him, stuck in a bottomless swamp. The funniest part about this whole interaction is Frieren pulls him out as soon as Fern arrives. This whole episode was very much centered around comedy.
年上のお姉さんと旅がしたくないか？
バカかお前。そのためにガキの頃の俺は冒険者を目指したんだぜ。そのお姉さんはどこなの？
ここだよ、ザイン。
Fight! Choose your fighter!
Sein only stays with the party for a very short amount of time, as he needs to find his best friend, who left to become an adventurer 10 years ago. But in that limited time, he becomes such an important part of it. He assumes the role of the responsible adult. Well,
酒、タバコ、ギャンブル。さすがに生臭すぎないかな。
while constantly mediating the arguments between Frieren and Stark. With age comes wisdom. I love how HECATE also plays a big role in Sein's backstory, giving him the name of the goatee priest, and also the fact that Fern constantly asks him for advice, as he represents what HECATE used to be in her life. It just makes it feel like it was all meant to be, with Frieren assuming the role of Himmel, Stark with Eisen, Fern with Frieren, and Sein with HECATE. I don't want to go too much into the character of Sein, as I'm sure we will see him again someday, and hopefully along with the gorilla warrior. Now this is the part of the video where I stop talking about the show and start gushing praises about it, because Frieren Beyond Journey's End deserves it. The world building in this show is absolutely masterful. There is a lot of show not tell going on even with the characters that we see in the first episode. The story immediately gives us a little something to care about these characters, to make us like them even before we have gotten to know them. Himmel talking about how handsome he is, HECATE being an alcoholic and being picky with his food, Frieren constantly getting stuck in mimics, and Sein being freaking awesome. This show does so much, yet so little. There's so much care given to these little character moments and interactions that you can't help but love these people. It's so endearing to watch Frieren and Fern's relationship change over the course of time, from mentor and student to something deeper. She basically takes the role of Frieren's mother as the show goes along, feeding her, getting her dressed, as God knows that Frieren is not a morning person. They have come a long way from Fern getting upset over Frieren wanting to stay in some town for a long time to her just accepting it and setting boundaries, and Frieren compromising with them. During their conversation with Sensei in the Old King ruins, Fern describes how the only reason she continues to search for magic is because she likes seeing Frieren happy. Even if they argue, there is love behind it. Frieren is trying her best to understand and acknowledge Fern as a student, but most of all, someone she deeply cares for. Even if she doesn't really understand the significance of the broken staff, she still goes out of her way to get it repaired just because it would make Fern happy. It is these moments that make this story so beautiful for me. Little moments like during the 6 months where the party stayed in a shelter along with Croft. We don't see Frieren praying along with everyone, but during this stay with Sein, she starts to pray. Perhaps her conversation with Croft, in which he describes how he would like to be praised by the goddess when he goes to heaven, leading to a flashback with HECATE where he talks about the same thing. It's here he acknowledges that he knows that Frieren suppresses her mana and would like to learn more about it in case he has a child that wanted to become a mage. It is beautiful. HECATE is probably the reason why Fern was already quite good at concealing her mana, even before meeting Frieren, because he probably told her about Frieren and how she used to train. Frieren empathizes with their want to be praised by someone and starts to pray along with everyone. It just shows how much Frieren has grown as a person. Or when the party visits a restaurant and Stark wonders what he should order, you see Frieren recommend him something, and that something turns out to be Himmel's favorite dish, roof omelets. The conversation between Sein and Frieren about being an adult and remembering her conversation with HECATE, how he talked about just pretending to be an adult until he passes away, which again leads to the concept of being praised by someone. And Frieren's favorite gesture, headbats. Lots and lots of headbats. Little things like these often just come back together so beautifully. The writing for the story is incredibly well put together. Character interactions mean something. People grow over the course of the story and things intertwine so expertly. All of this just goes to show how much of an expert storyteller Kanehito Yamada actually is. I could go on and on about these little moments, and this could easily be an hour-long video. But let's talk about the world of Frieren. I love how the passage of time in this show is depicted by how much time has passed since the death of Himmel the hero. To me, this carries a much greater meaning than just to show the passage of time. Before meeting Himmel and his party, Frieren spent hundreds of years in isolation. I doubt she had ever even considered how much time had passed. Even after their 10-year-long adventure, she didn't think much of the time she had spent with them. After all, to her, 10 years isn't even close to 1/100th of her lifespan. But Himmel's death affected her greatly. It is because of him that she has decided to get to know humans better. It's those 50 years she had lost that have left her with a deep sense of regret. And to me, this symbolizes how Frieren perceives time now. She counts the years since Himmel has passed. As time goes on, the years start to pass even slower, showing how much she has slowed down. She has started to cherish her time with Fern and Stark, and the time spent with them is important. It's something she holds dear to her heart. The way the story handles the lore of the world is nothing short of exceptional. There is deep lore in this story that is often hinted at, but never really shoved down our throats. It's a beautiful dance of show not tell. The story slowly reveals these little bits of information as Frieren, Fern and later Stark continue their journey. We have Qual, the elder sage of corruption, a general of the Demon King who was sealed by the hero's party because he was just too strong to be defeated. It's been 80 years since then, and the killing magic that he developed has been studied by humans and incorporated into the human magic system, rendering it useless in lethal combat. And again, an emphasis on the passage of time, stating that 80 years is a lot of time for humanity, and clearly they have advanced considerably since the last time they fought. The world of Frieren is inhabited by monsters like Einsam, which draws people in through illusions of dead loved ones, or chaos flowers that merge with the local flora to inflict a sleeping curse on the people around it as it slowly saps away their mana. There are dragons, and whatever this is, I want it. I need it. Even after the death of the Demon King, the remnants of his army still remain. The people that live here are engaged in a constant battle of survival. So many people have lost their lives in this constant tug of war of life. We meet these people, learn of their struggles, and the dear ones they have lost. Among these remnants is Aura, the guillotine, who uses the scales of obedience to force her will upon others. To further avoid disobedience, she cuts off the heads of her subjects, an act of utmost evil and savagery. The flesh has long since crumbled. All that remains is nothing but a husk that binds the soul in eternal servitude. The added detail about how demons don't understand familial love, but they still use words like mother and father to deceive humans. It's interesting to see a story where demons are just monsters. There are no good demons, or at least not as of yet. They're nothing but man-eating creatures that will trick you until they get what they desire. They use mana as a status symbol, just like how humans use wealth and power. So they never even think about hiding it, which leads them to underestimate Frieren, as she has been constantly suppressing her mana for 1,000 years.
Aura, 自害しろ。ありえない。
I also love how magic works in this universe. Human magic is different from demon magic and the magic of the clergy. Curses in this universe are fundamentally different from normal magic, and not a lot is known about them. Holy magic, on the other hand, is recorded in scriptures, and only a specific few with a knack for it can use it. Little details about how flying magic was exclusive to demons and that the humans just repurpose the spell for themselves, but they still don't really understand the principles behind it, so they can't really effectively use the spell for other purposes. Magic is literally a world of visualization. If you can't visualize a spell or an outcome with it, you simply can't do it, which makes certain mages ridiculously powerful. Power scales literally don't matter. The battles between mages is described as an incredibly complicated game of rock, papers and scissors with almost infinite outcomes. It is so good. Through the first few episodes, we learn about Flamme, the legendary mage, and how most of the writings attributed to her are supposed to be fake, but we're never explained to why they're fake until we meet Sein, who asks Frieren to help him in finding the lost notes of the legendary mage. It is here we find out that Frieren is indeed the student of Flamme, and that's how she knows they are fake. We come across Kraft the monk and another elf during our journey. Kraft has been alive for so long that all the people that knew about his righteous triumphs have died. During his conversation with Frieren, we're introduced to some lore about the mythological era and how the goddess of creation hasn't shown herself ever since. After 6 months, the party says their goodbyes to Kraft. But then, we stumble across a statue of some forgotten ancient heroes in a random village, and lo and behold, it's Kraft. No one knows when was the statue erected. We as viewers are just left to wonder, will we ever find out? And this is the same statue that connects us back to Sein and his backstory. It is so well done. We learn the story of Old Man Wall, an old dwarf who still protects the village his wife, a human, used to live in, bound by the promise of love. And through the passage of time, he has even forgotten the face and the voice of his beloved, and yet he protects the village, staying true to his promise. We see Frieren the happiest she has ever looked, just talking to Wall and reminiscing about the past. But then, the real punch to the gut arrives.
ところで、お前たちの旅の目的地はどこなんだ?
魂の眠る地、オレオールを目指しているよ。
ついに魔王を倒しに行くのか。平和な時代が
As someone who is currently experiencing a loved one go through this stage of old age, this hit close to home. And then there are the side characters in the show. Well, not really, because Frieren Beyond Journey's End doesn't really have side characters. During the first class mage exam arc, we're introduced to a number of new characters. It is clear that the main goal of this part of the story is to introduce us to these new people. But the show does an exceptionally well job of introducing and fleshing out these characters. We have Weerbol, a second-class mage and captain of the Northern Magic Corps. I didn't really think much of him at first, but after the last episode, you can't dislike the guy. I really appreciate the detail of him being inspired by the more mundane stories of Himmel the hero. Denken, an imperial mage who has all the influence and power that he desires, and yet he remains humble. The fact that he just wants to become a first-class mage to visit his wife's grave just makes me love him even more. He has a sense of pride and justice, along with a mean set of hands. There is Land, Mr. Satellite Range Kagebunshi no Jutsu, who passes the test without even leaving his home. And then there is a completely broken Ubel. She possesses the ability to copy any spell as long as she can empathize with the person casting it. I don't know why, but little details like how her Sorganil is a little crooked, showing us how she uses spells without actually understanding them, just like what Land said to her.
僕、そういう頭の足りない子嫌いなんだよね。
Makes my brain tingle. And after an excellent episode showcasing her abilities, I am only going to say one thing. I can fix her. The story gives so much time and importance to each and every one of these characters that you are immediately intrigued by them. And I'm sure The whole premise of Frieren being a long-lived elf acts like a venue for the stories of these other main characters to unfold. Like I said before, Frieren is a vessel, a book thousands of years old, which carries the memories of all these people into the future. There aren't many side characters in this story, except these guys. Or Tenten?
Huh?
Another big revelation during this arc was the introduction to Zerie, and another long-lived elf who established the Continental Magic Association, along with being a living grimoire, granting any one spell as a privilege to the new first-class mages. The even bigger surprise was the reveal that she's the mentor to Flamme. She's also a big tsundere. She says one thing but does the exact opposite. During the first flashback where Flamme introduces Frieren to Zerie, Zerie asks Frieren for any spell she desires, but when Frieren refuses, she smiles and then immediately refutes Frieren, calling her no good. After Flamme's death, Frieren again visits Zerie to deliver Flamme's will, and this is what she says. First impression, that's rude, but then, after some important history lesson about the history of human magic, she says it again but with a much more somber expression, and all the pieces start to assemble together. Ladies and gentlemen, this is indeed copium. She smiles as she remembers Flamme during her childhood. She refuses to comply by Flamme's last request to teach humanity magic, but eventually ends up establishing the Magical Association. She constantly contradicts herself by saying she wouldn't take on a human disciple, but is surrounded by human mages. And the moment she finds promise in Frieren, she asks her to be her disciple. During the last test, she's surrounded by flowers made with magic. The same spell she called useless. A spell either cast by her or someone she had taught it to. After all, it was Flamme's favorite spell. It is here we find out a little more about her. Even though she deems all of her past students as failures for not reaching her level, she still remembers everything about them. She has never once regretted taking in an apprentice. Zerie is such an interesting take on an all-powerful character. Usually, when you have a character so strong like this, they're usually portrayed with much more indifference to everything around them, which in turn poses a stark contrast to the main character of the story. Zerie, on the other hand, almost comes off as sad. She may talk about her indifference to things, but underneath all that, she's just a softie. Who knows what type of loneliness awaits someone who has lived for so long, and she seems to hide it with a little hint of sun. Throughout Frieren's journey, we see multiple flashbacks to Himmel, and it is through these flashbacks we start to put together how everything in Frieren's journey eventually comes back to him. Himmel is undoubtedly an integral part of Frieren's story. We see his statues laid out throughout the lands of this world. The children that were saved by Himmel 80 years ago are now old men and women, but they haven't forgotten Himmel the hero. They still tell tales about how the hero's party once helped them vanquish the demons from their village, or perhaps lended their aid with menial tasks of helping them carry things from one place to another. And it is these stories that have sprung a new generation of people who have grown up admiring them. It's still too early for the world to forget Himmel, and his legacy still lives on. Himmel is the reason Frieren is on this new journey to find Oriole, the land where souls rest, to talk to Himmel, to finally get to know him and take back the 50 years she had wasted. But little does she knows so much more about him than she thinks she does. Throughout this journey of retracing her steps, she remembers Himmel, his voice, and her actions reflect that very fact. Every little thing she does is because Himmel would have done the same. She helps people along her way because it's what Himmel used to do when they journeyed together. Even her excitement for dungeon exploration comes from Himmel. She holds Feren's hand when she is sick because Himmel would hold her hand when she was sick. Even down to the way she says goodbye to people comes from Himmel. And it's not just Frieren, the whole world has been influenced by Himmel. He is the shining ray of hope who kept the remaining demons at bay, and only after his death did they come out of hiding. A fake hero who failed to take out the hero's sword but nonetheless defeated the Demon King. I love the little flashback to when Himmel talks about why he wanted to become the hero.
村の孤児院にハイターってムカつくやつがいてね、偽物の剣しか持っていないから偽物の勇者にしかなれないと僕に言ったんだ。じゃあ本物になってやろうじゃないか。そう思ったんだ。
When Frieren asks HECATE about why he ended up taking Fern in, we flash back to HECATE remembering Himmel. So much of the reasoning behind the actions of our characters is just because Himmel would have done the same. Himmel is the bond that keeps the people together. Even after his death, he is still very much among us. As Frieren forms a new party, her old party members are replaced by their legacies. Sein takes place of HECATE, Stark takes the place of Eisen, Fern takes the place of Frieren. But what about Himmel? No one can replace Himmel. Frieren herself becomes the new Himmel of her party. She's slowly starting to understand him through repeating his actions, his words, and this in turn helps her to bring out her real self to the people around her, the person Himmel fell in love with. And speaking of love, even though Himmel knew that his feelings were only one-sided, well, at least for now, who knows how long does it take for an elf to process their emotions and actually fall in love? Frieren might say that elves lack romantic feelings, but I would like to think that it just takes them too long to realize that they have fallen in love because of how their internal clock works. Despite all this, Himmel never forced his feelings upon her. He let her go in hopes that maybe she would come back one day, and even though it never happened until the end of his life, he never held a grudge for it. Truly a real gentleman. The Frieren we see now would have been a completely different person if not for Himmel. He has done so much for Frieren and still continues to do so as Frieren embarks on this new journey. Honestly, it's ironic how this whole journey Frieren has undertaken is to get back to Himmel, to get to know him. But as time progresses, she slowly starts to realize how much she actually knows about him. I wouldn't be surprised if this story was a love story all along. As I am writing this script, there are a couple of questions that have come up in my mind. Firstly, why? Why am I being compelled to write about this show? What is it about this particular show that has me so moved that I feel the need to express it to the whole world? And secondly, what is the beauty of Frieren to me? The story of Frieren could have easily gone in a much different direction. We have a standard fantasy setting, including a hero, a warrior, a priest, a mage, and also a demon king. These are all concepts that already exist in the genre. We are aware of what a demon king is. We are familiar with the concept of elves, dwarves, and magic. In fact, the concept of immortality and the lifespan of elves is nothing novel. It has been done before. So why is it that I've spent almost a month of my life making this video? And why are you still here almost 40 minutes in? Why have I rewatched this show 6 times? I don't need help. And every time I did, I had a smile on my face. What is it about this particular story that has compelled us all to come together collectively and say, this is it? I think I have an answer. What the story of Frieren does exceptionally well is it takes those familiar concepts and uses them as a building block to tell a much more intimate and mundane story. This story could have easily gone in a direction where, surprise surprise, you think the Demon King is dead. Well, not really. Rather, it chooses to focus on concepts that are much more personal. This isn't some grand adventure to defeat the big bad once again, where a new evil has emerged and now Frieren, with the help of her new party, has to defeat it once again, but now she is the hero of this journey. What we get is a deeply mature story about characters that you immediately fall in love with, without bombarding us with useless information or a bunch of menus that do nothing for us to truly get to know the people we are going to be spending time with. The character interactions in this story feel real. Scenes are given time to breathe. There isn't an inherent urgency to further the plot just to keep the audience engaged. Instead, the show takes its time. There is a sense of calm and stillness to the show. The shots are drawn out. Everything moves so slow, which is a perfect parallel to how Frieren might view the world. Why would you rush if you had all the time in the world? It is a truly character-driven show in its purest sense, and it reflects in the way the characters are animated so expressively. So much effort has been put to elevate these moments with a little bit of extra animation, and I for one am truly grateful for it. Half of the show is just doing nothing. Our characters often spend months stuck in a place, just existing, and for some reason these are my favorite parts of the show. And every time it happens, we are blessed with a beautiful montage of them just spending time together. I love these montages, and they happen every time our party decides to stay at a particular place for some time. I love the use of flashbacks to further add depth to Frieren's character and draw parallels between who she is now and who she used to be. These are her core memories that she holds dear to her heart, and we see how she has changed in such a short amount of time. Well, I say short, but we are counting in elf time. It is this seemingly mundane nature of the story in which lies the true beauty of Frieren. And speaking of mundane, how about mundane magic? One of the more interesting aspects of this show is how it doesn't take the concept of magic for granted. You can't perform a specific action and just call it magic. Every little action has its own spell associated with it, and Frieren, being the conservationalist she is, collects these odd little spells. You cannot tell me that laundry magic or spells for getting rid of oil stains or mold are not ridiculously OP. Frieren is basically a walking life hack.
Somebody please get this
woman a YouTube channel.
I think it's safe to say that Madhouse has delivered what can only be called as a cinematic masterpiece. Starting from the beautifully rendered backgrounds with a hint of film grain. So much hard work has been put into these backdrops. There's so much detail in every frame, and it really helps with the immersion. Lighting is the key here. The way the line art disappears into the edge light with a little fringe of green and the clear motifs of sunrise and sunsets, it's magical to look at. And this level of detail also carries to the objects. Food in this show looks especially scrumptious, and the flowers in this show are beautifully detailed and animated, given their significance to Frieren. The quality of animation on display here is nothing short of exceptional. Characters are animated so expressively, little movements have extra bit of animation added to them, and it's these little things that are so easily taken for granted when they're done so well. because to a normal person it just feels natural. Everything down to how characters move and to the animation on the clothes is so painstakingly fluid. One of the interesting things about the characters is how their names directly translate to their character traits. It's a neat bit of added detail that really speaks to how expertly this story is written. I must say this show has one of the best hair animation that I have ever seen. My favorite scene from this show is episode 14, when Frieren flies up to find her eternal engagement ring in the middle of the night. There is so much going on in this scene, how the hair moves so aggressively and yet looks so beautiful, the flutter of her scarf, and most of all, the meaning behind it. Wow. And then there are the battles in this show.
ゾルトラークを
What more there is to say that already hasn't been said about the fights in this show? Everything down to the choreography, the movement and the flow of animation and the grand spectacle is a sight to behold. The way this show makes visual noise look absolutely stunning is a grand feat in itself. The fight between Frieren and Fern is a great example how visual noise can be made to look so beautiful. It's almost as if reality itself is being shattered. And all of this is further elevated by one of the best original soundtracks by Evan Cole. The sound design in this show is also exceptional.
もしかしてこのまま合格してしまうのでは。
Huh?
There are so many emotional moments that are further elevated by this soundtrack, and the great use of musical cues at just the right moment to take the scene to further beyond. From an absolutely banger opening by Yaosobi to a mesmerizing ending by Millard, Frieren Beyond's Journey's End does not miss. I cannot say enough good things about Frieren Beyond's Journey's End. I could sit here for hours and talk about every little aspect of the show. And to me, it is these visuals, storytelling, rich characters, and exceptional musical score that form the perfect symphony of what I think is the beauty of Frieren. Or perhaps the real beauty of Frieren is the Frierens we made all along.
フリーレン様、こいつはダメです。
And can we just appreciate that this show doesn't go out of its way to sexualize its main characters? Oh. Hey guys, thank you so much for watching, and if you'd like to support me, you can check out my Patreon where you can find all of the art for the title cards and the character sheets for free. And also this drawing of one of my favorite scenes from the show in 8K for just $3. Along with a surprise, which may or may not tell you what anime I'm planning to make a video about next. And I'll be adding much more artworks to my Patreon as the channel grows. So yeah, thank you so much for watching, and bye bye.